around here, but hopefully it's all, most of you are able to follow. And I hope the catch-up is also working. I know some of you are following. Jnanavaca was saying he's following some of yesterday's program mixed with some live today's program. So good luck with that, Jnanavaca. And here's Artakuslin. Hello, Artakuslin. Lovely to see you. Lovely to have your little encouraging messages as well. Thank you very, very much. So, and yes, some of you I don't know so well. Who's that in the red jumper? Who are you with the very red jumper? Can't quite read your...
Maitri Siddha.
Maitri Siddha. Hello there, Maitri Siddha. Great, good. Okay, so yes, saluting the shrine, that's what we'll do. And then I'll say a little bit more about what we're going to do in this session. So let's salute the shrine. Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dhammaya.
Sanghaya.
Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namah.
So that came out deeper than I intended. I've just woken up, that's why. Very good. So yeah, as I'm sure all of you know, there's so many ways of working with anatta, both in and outside of meditation. If we had longer, you know, this retreat, we were planning on having longer, and we would have done, I don't know, maybe 2 days on each Lakshana to go in with 2 days of each myth and things. But, you know, we decided to shorten it a bit, given that it's an online retreat. So what am I trying to say? I hope that if there are things that you feel you want to just kind of go slower at your own pace, for example, if the dukkha reflection feels more relevant right now, then do feel free to just experiment. You don't have to follow the program quite as me and my Tribandhu are doing. We're coming up with new, what I'm trying to do and what my Tribandhu is trying to do is just give you as much, as many kind of tools that we think are useful, that we've used. But really we're squeezing it into quite a short period of time. So, you know, you take it at your own sort of pace. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, a retreat? Because you partly want to have a deep experience. Well, I do anyway. I want a deeper experience on retreat. Of course I do. And I want to come away with some learning that then I can apply later on. And sometimes it's hard to get the balance right, I guess. So I think we're doing quite a lot of content. But hopefully you'll find something of it useful. So I want to say a little bit more about another way of working, both in and out of meditation. I find it helpful in meditation. And that's to do with Subhuti's coined the term reaction practice. How many are you familiar with reaction practice? Just maybe, yeah. And so about maybe a third of you, maybe half of you. I think he's been teaching this way of practicing for a few years now, and I've certainly found it very, very helpful. It's a way of reflecting on, not just reflecting, but going deeper into trying to free oneself from self-clinging in everyday life, as well as in meditation. I think one of the things, before I say more about reaction practice, I think one of the things about self-clinging is that it can be really subtle. I mean, obviously, it can also be really gross, but as people who have been practicing the Dharma for years, it's likely that oftentimes, at least, it's quite subtle and not easy to spot. And if you're like me, I can be quite good at arranging life in a way that sort of works for me, suits me. We sometimes say community living is you get the edges knocked off you because you get you meet with other people and rubbed up the wrong way, etc. And that's true. Apart from I live with really good people, lovely people that I really like, and and I work with people that I really like, and certainly since my mother died, I don't have to earn a living. I've got an inheritance. So I work at the LBC, teaching, meeting up with people. Most of my life is very good, pleasant, and most people I meet tend to be nice to me. I mean, they're not always nice behind my back, and I know I rub people up the wrong way and things, but they tend to be quite nice. So I don't always know the depth of my self-clinging until, of course, something happens when things don't go my way, and that does happen, and then I react. So I think that as order members, we've worked quite a lot, many of us, I guess, probably all of us, with harmony in that with ethics, with staying relatively positive in most situations. We've got a level of integration and emotional positivity, which can mean that life works out fairly well. And it can then mean that there isn't the internal impetus to root out deeper levels of self-clinging. That has to come from somewhere. Often, of course, dukkha hits, and we are confronted. But actually, it's really good to be working, isn't it, in this way when things are going well, if we can find the motivation. Anyway, so I say that. So for me, for example, what can happen anyway, not always, is that meditation can be quite pleasurable. So I can sit down and become relatively absorbed and experience pleasure. Doing my sadhana, I can experience, shraddha and pleasure and da-da-da-da. And for years, what I found was that, I was experiencing quite a lot of expansive, joyful, pleasurable states in meditation, particularly my sadhana. And it didn't seem to have very much transformative effect on my life. In a certain sense, I didn't feel that I was necessarily going deeper into rooting out self-clinging. It would be like in meditation, the doors would open, as it were. I'd experience expansive states. I'd come out of meditation and then clam shut, and I would be back in my small mind with my petty wants and not wants and so forth. Pettiness, really, triviality, and self-preoccupation. Anyway, so I found Subhuti's teaching of this thing called reaction practice, which he's coined. I'm not sure it's a great word, but it's what we've got. Very, very useful, very, very useful. And these days, what I do is I deliberately provoke reactivity, or look for where there is reactivity before I meditate. So let me explain a little bit what Subhuti means. So what he's saying is that when we react, I think it works better, this, by the way, with aversion rather than with craving. Of course, it is possible to do this practice with craving, but it seems to be flows more naturally with aversion. But if you find otherwise, let me know. when we react, first of all, to notice it. And what Subhuti is getting at is that the reaction, so something hasn't gone our way, normally it's another person. They've irritated us, annoyed us, insulted us, misunderstood us, whatever it is. Normally it's other people, isn't it? Although it can be life itself, I guess. But we first of all notice it, that we have reacted. That seems to be really important because it is easy when you're relatively adept at practice to somehow not notice it or not take the reaction very seriously, especially if it's quite small. We can think, okay, well, that's all right. I don't know, go and have a cup of tea and I'll lie down and it will be fine. Or talk to a friend or moan to a friend, or in my case, have a piece of cake or chocolate and life's sort of all right again. So really notice it and see it as an opportunity to work with self-clinging. Because what's happening when we react is our insight is being tested, if you see what I mean. I think it's only in difficult situations, normally with people, that our insights, whatever they are tested. So our insight is being tested to its limits, and self-clinging is being exposed. Our self-clinging is being exposed. Subhuti says it's like a borehole. Our reaction is like a borehole into self-clinging. So it's an opportunity because our egotism has reared its head and shown itself when oftentimes it lies below the level of consciousness, of our conscious sort of understanding. So if it's below the surface, often we can't do very much about it. Here is an opportunity because it's risen, our egotism has risen above the surface of consciousness, it's broken through, or we've broken into it. It's like a borehole into self-clinging, this reaction. So with an insight way of working, a Vipassana way of working, we don't want to, in a way, feel bad about the reaction. Well, that doesn't help anyway. In terms of guilt or something neurotic, we don't want to cover it up, and we don't want to easily just apply metta as an antidote to the reaction, to any ill will or aversion that's arisen. Of course, if we were working at a shamatha level, that's what we would do. We would say, okay, we'll bring in some metta or contentment if it's craving, and work with your reactivity at that sort of level of karma. But here we're having a Vipassana approach. So we see this as an opportunity, this reaction, to deepen our insight. So that's the first thing. We don't push the reaction away, we notice it. In fact, we welcome it as an opportunity. Easier said than done, but it's a bit like Shantideva in the Bodhicharyavatara, talking sometimes a lot, sometimes sort of ad nauseum, as it were, about the opportunities of difficult situations. So your enemy is your greatest friend. That's the sort of approach that we're taking. In fact, Subhuti says it's really good if you've got an enemy. If you've got an enemy, if you've got somebody who you're obsessed by, and it's painful, so you can't get them out of your mind, or your mind keeps coming back to them with some sort of hurt or pain or anger or blame or whatever it is. So if we've got that, what Subhuti says in teaching this is that's a great gift. That's a great gift. So he is taking the same sort of line as Shantideva. So that's an opportunity to work with our clinging, self-clinging. And so I hope there's some somebody or some situation that you can bring to mind, as it were, to work with this practice? I definitely can. So what you do then is the reaction is seen as an opportunity, and the next step is to make sure that we really own it as our reaction. I take responsibility for it. So we let go of any narrative of blame or righteous indignation, or how we try and correct any injustice or heal any hurt by, in our mind, creating a story that redresses the balance. Well, let go of all of that, to the extent that you can, and take responsibility. It's sort of, again, basic Dharma, that no matter what they've done to us, again, it's, I bring the body, they bring the stick. Whatever they've done to us, it's my reaction, and I own my reaction because I'm responsible for my mind. So we see it as an opportunity, so that's already trying to bring a degree of positivity and shraddha, I think, to bear. Then we own the reaction, we let go of any narratives as best we can, which tends to mean coming into the body and feeling the painful feelings, the uncomfortable feelings, being prepared to sit with them in the way that we've been talking about already. With patience and not with aversion, with a real sort of curiosity, not just patience, but interest. Here is Vedana, here is Samya, here is Sanskara, it's all going on. Here is Vijnana, Chitta, stories. So we sit with the sort of physical and emotional consequences of the reaction, and then we try and go deeper into it. So rather than avoid it, which is what avoid those painful, uncomfortable sensations, instead we investigate them. We feel them more intensely, and turn towards them with a sort of with interest, with a sort of real sort of penetrative gaze, trying to, of course, keep gentle about it. And here, what Subhuti says is that you can ask questions. So one of the things he suggests is you can ask yourself, what has been threatened? So something in me has been threatened. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a reaction. So what has been threatened? And you look for what has been threatened. So it's a way of, in a way, asking yourself, where is the I, the me, that has been hurt? And of course, you look, and what you find is Vedana, and you find perception, samnya, and you find volition, samskara. You don't find a self, a fix, and a separate self having the reaction. You find experience, and that experience is always in flux. And then you allow that to sort of to really sink in. It's like at this point, bhavnamai prajna, the actual wisdom and meditation can arise. It's like you can become absorbed at that point, because, well, what you might find is that the reactive patterns dissolve as you explore them in this wisdom way with prajna. They dissolve, and what opens up is release and relief, as we've been talking about, and spaciousness. So it's a very sort of direct way of working on self-clinging. Sometimes what I do, I don't particularly ask myself who's been threatened or what has been threatened. I think what I do mainly is just notice that what is happening is a fluctuation, a sort of confluence of Vedana and Samya and Sanskara. There's story as well, perhaps going on, it's still in my mind, but that's just story. There's feelings of tightness and tension in the body that are uncomfortable. There's an emotional kind of hurt, maybe, or anger, or the energy of that. That's all there is. And none of that is me. None of that is inherently self. So that's the sort of awareness that I try to bring to it. Now, what I do is, because I can be quite good at bypassing my reactivity or managing my life, what I do is I deliberately, sort of every day really, but before I meditate, well, the first aspect of my meditation, if I'm doing my sadhana, is I deliberately bring up something that might have caused a little bit of dukkha, little bit or maybe more. That could be something that's happened in the last 24 hours. Or it could be any long-standing, I don't know, dukkha or hurt from the past. I kind of just bring it up. I go burrowing around for where is the dukkha in my experience. So if there's somebody that I feel upset with, I deliberately bring them to mind and the upset to mind. Sort of provoke the reaction, if you see what I mean, so that then I can do this reaction practice. Yeah, I'm finding it's very helpful, very, very helpful. In both in terms of the meditation, it takes me deeper into anatta, but also, of course, in life. Yeah. So does that make sense? The last bit, which is about sort of going deeper into the sensations and into the experience, that does feel a bit more hard to talk about. So, I've given you a couple of suggestions, like you could ask yourself, what's been threatened? You could say, where is the me in this? Where is the I in this? Or you could just notice that the actual experience doesn't have a self behind it. There is just fluctuating flow of sensations and emotions and maybe narrative and volitions. The skandhas are all at play, but there's no owner. There's no owner behind them. Yeah. And sometimes it can help to just notice the impermanence of them as you bring them to mind. They're fluid, not static. I mean, you must have had this, well, I have anyway, where Shantideva's words of, a few years ago, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago or something, I don't know, I did a long solitary, and when I went on the solitary, I had a couple of people in mind that I thought, oh, I've got difficulties with, and I ended up, by the end of the long solitary, it was 6 months, feeling really grateful to them, feeling really grateful because I was doing this reaction practice and experiencing not just the release from that particular dukkha, but it has a knock-on effect, because obviously if self-clinging reduces, you experience greater and greater joy and spaciousness and freedom. So I really did I had to concede that Shantideva was really right. It just takes a lot of intensity, as it were. So that's what I'm going to suggest we do in the next session is, if you want to, you don't have to, you could just sit or work with anatta in another way, in the way that Maitra Bandhu was teaching this morning. But if you want to, what I'm going to suggest is that we deliberately provoke a reaction, some sort of dukkha, by bringing someone or some situation to mind that might do that, and then work with the resulting experience with the lens of anatta. Yeah. Does that sound clear enough? Good. Good. Let's take a couple of minutes and have a short break, and a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back. Okay, very good. So, yeah, one thing I should have said is that when you do experience some release and freedom and spaciousness, well, then all you need to do is rest in that. So then don't carry on provoking the reaction. If freedom, if sort of bhavna prajna arises, and there's a sense of knowing that yes, there's no one having the reaction. If that arises, there'll be a sense of freedom. Then just rest in that. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll lead us in with a short body awareness, but I won't say how to work with the reaction. So I'll leave that to you if you want to do it. And of course, if you don't want to do this, feel free to sit and in your own way. And we'll sit for about 40 minutes. Probably the last 15 or so minutes, I'll suggest that we just sit. So I'll say that. And I'll also read some Rumi. Yeah, so, good. So settling down. So perhaps starting with the broad awareness of your environment and sounds you can hear, the temperature of the room. The air against your skin. And then bringing awareness into the body. Having a sense of settling, as if the body were a big sack of rice settling onto the ground. And seeing if you can have a sense of the legs becoming heavy, the muscles in the legs softening. And the upper body rising up, supported by the spine in its natural curves. Softening the face. The mouth and the jaw. The eyes. The shoulders. seeing if you can soften in the belly. I groaned. Be quiet, he said. I was quiet. He said, groan. I grew feverish. He said, be calm. I grew calm. He said, I want you to burn. sitting. I groaned. Be quiet, he said. I was quiet. He said, groan. I grew feverish. He said, be calm. I grew calm. He said, I want you to burn. So we'll leave it there for that session and meet again in just under 2 hours' time. Thank you.